We are nearing the 3-month release from Lost Ark here in the West, and it's undeniable the level of success this game is having. And that's what we're going to do in today's video in this state of the game for Lost Ark. We're going to explore the numbers, talk about the hours, talk about the bots, talk about the state of the game and how Lost Ark is performing. If you guys haven't seen the numbers, note that Lost Ark is actually on a brand new surge, and we're going to talk about it in this video. Feel free to share your own theories as it relates to this, but we're also going to talk about the positive and negative impacts of Lost Ark's success here in the MMO genre as a market, as something that now companies are going to be looking towards to model their own MMORPGs, action MMORPGs off of. And note that there are some on the way. Some of them look really incredible, and I can't wait to talk more about those as they get near for you guys. But let's spend some time and let's dive into the numbers and let's look at the formulas and determine how well this game is performing. I'm going to put my biases aside. I'd love to hear any and all your thoughts. Feel free to challenge my own in the comments, but let's go ahead and dive in. First and foremost, we're going to be using a couple sources for our numbers. We're going to start with Steam charts here, and we're going to look at the current active players at the time of this recording. But more importantly, what I like to highlight is the hours played. And right now you can see it at 245 million. Now, the standard gamer will play around 7.1 hours per week, and I like to factor in an hours of 10 per MMO player. But the other equation in line where you see kind of an industry standard is that you usually take the concurrence and you either multiply it by 7 or 11. 7 to 11 seems to be the range, and I can tell you hands down, based off everything I've seen so far, they are operating at an 11 times multiplier. But let's just take the hours and let's use my calculation at 40 hours a month of average playtime, roughly 10 hours a week, a little bit more than the standard player for the MMO. Now, I'll hear this comment, and I know that it's already probably been written at the time of this recording. That's a lot of bots. That's a lot of bots. I would counter that every game, every MMO has a lot of bots. So we can kind of just factor in bots across all MMORPGs. That's been a common thing within the genre for like time immemorial. I think that's going to continue. We'll have to see how that ultimately plays out, if AI has a bigger impact on bots for future and modern MMORPGs. But anyway, maybe another thing to explore in a future video. But just looking at the hours alone, we are looking at roughly 6.1 million active players over the course of the month. And this is backed up by a couple other numbers, but we can also then take, let's take Lost Ark's 558,713 number, multiply by the standard 11, and yes, we're getting another 6.1 million players. So we'll explore a couple numbers on a couple different sites here for you guys. But note that that is pretty substantial. In fact, it actually, like according to MMO population, that actually puts Lost Ark as the #1 MMO being played right now. And we're starting to see, back into the Steam charts aspect, that while Lost Ark was losing players as expected over the course of any kind of hype cycle, we've seen them dip down 36% in the first month, or sorry, the last 30 days from February. It's launched on the 11th. And then in March, we saw a 25% drop to 332 average players, but now we're seeing those numbers climb up. And so those average players are going to start climbing up, which gives us a new current floor. And that's what I'm always interested in when it comes to these MMORPGs, because no matter what, you always kind of have to figure out what level of that hype value is, and then what is the community that's really active and more interested in playing. And yes, as a part of that is clearly gold farmers, people who are trying to monetize, trying to make money off of this, but it is truly spectacular in terms of what it already brings to the table. Now, again, like I said over here on MMO population, which you can easily discount for like various numbers, no one's going to ever give you exact numbers. And so anybody who's really wanting the actual numbers for any company, I invite you to go work for that company. Maybe they'll actually reveal them to you at that point. But what we've seen here is MMOs have become incredibly secretive, especially about their numbers. They will release vague numbers about how things are going in terms of players that have been killed, or number of enemies have been killed, or this is the most deadly boss. That seems to be kind of the shift in which they've gone into, and especially as MMOs themselves have shifted off of the subscription-based model for their funding. I think clearly, like, this is both on the positive and negative side. What this tells me is that on a positive note, MMOs, way more exposure. So a lot of companies are looking at Lost Ark's success and going to want to see if they can try and replicate that. While we don't know how that translates into money, we do know a lot of those players did end up spending money on these free-to-play packages, and at its core, like, it's still a substantial amount of money as a free-to-play game, quote unquote free-to-play. Here's the negative. The success in and of itself has the risk of setting an industry standard for MMOs going forward. You don't like, free-to-play games, but you're longing for something more in depth for an MMORPG. This is going to set a huge message to the genre as a whole. Anybody who's looking around for that. Now, if we look again, just from MMO populations numbers alone, they have their daily active players set at 1.72 million active players, 18 million total, which doesn't necessarily put it obviously as big as some of the other big MMOs out there, but this is still its kind of more global-esque launch. So I think this is, and just based off, again, the numbers starting to trend back up, sets the floor here on an average, if we're just going to speak to concurrence right there. And that, I think, is absolutely impressive to see that, and that maintain itself over on Steam. Now, we'll have to keep you guys up to date over the course of this, because content is going to be king, and as long as they keep putting out content, I think that's why we're actually seeing that new wave of players coming in, returning, and continuing to actually play Lost Ark, despite like the, what I see online with people, like the whole thing about the free to play, like the pay to win aspect of it, is a vocal part of the community that actively is against that payment model. But then you go and you actually compare them and their comments to the active players, basically almost giving people who are upset by pay to win games the middle finger, because of just its volume and its size. Like, so this is something that if you are anti free to play MMORPG, like, this is hopefully a wake up call to say, like, what you're actually stacking up against in terms of what the value proposition is. And so from that, hopefully this gives you guys some like understanding and some, almost in a way, a little fire under your asses to sit here and say, okay, how do we like either support the games financially that we want to support, so that that message is being sent out to the developers, that message is being sent out to the publishers. I still, to this day, am flabbergasted and a little bit blown away by the fact that how much money mobile gaming brings in, that we still get normal games, that we still get like, things like Elden Ring, that we still get these big, awesome games. And the fact that Elden Ring did so well, thank you all for that. Like, A, introducing me to that game, but B, having that sell-through happen of that game, because gaming companies, they can get into this habit of like this risk aversion. I think MMORPGs over the course of the WoW era have really kind of shifted into that. We saw so many MMORPGs come out and literally crap the bed. And because of that, we've seen less and less risk aversion. And so the biggest complaint comes into play is like, oh, they're all just the same. They're all not really even taking risks, because there's not an advantage to it. They end up running more risk of actually losing players than they do retaining them. And that's why, again, the positive and the negative is lots of MMORPG exposure, but as a free-to-play game, if you don't like what Lost Ark is doing, you might end up being in a world of hurt, because that literally is being the message of what is being supported. And so we vote with our dollars, and clearly right now Lost Ark is winning in terms of any kind of like election of dollars right now. And whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, sound off in the comments below. I think this is just, from a case study perspective, absolutely the most fascinating stuff to see, especially within this genre. I've long been asking, what the hell is Amazon thinking in terms of why are they making a third MMORPG? Clearly, I think they see something in the numbers that we just don't have access to, but the picture's starting to become pretty clear. I think there's a hunger that players have for the genre, and they might be the ones who end up capitalizing on offering a wide range of MMO products. So regardless of whether you like Lost Ark or New World or whatever the third MMORPG is, like at its core, I think they could literally be somebody who comes in and represents, and like you might say, hey, I don't like free-to-play MMOs, but you're playing, like, who knows, maybe their next MMO actually is a subscription-based MMO, which would be freaking wild in my opinion. I don't see that actually happening going forward, but I'd love to be proven wrong in that respect. The final thought I want to leave you guys with in today's video, and thank you so much for hanging out. If you made it all the way to this point in the video, sound off in the comments with hootie hoo freaking hoo-hoo or something of that nature. I'll get it. I think some people in the comments reading them will be really confused. But the final thought I want to leave you with is that in terms of what that is, when we start talking about and looking at what's also on the horizon, I do wonder if we'll see Amazon pick up more deals like they're doing right now. Think Blue Protocol. Right now I think Tower of Fantasy is getting ready to come out later this year. I think they've already got a publisher, but I think of anybody who hasn't necessarily got a publisher or something that is out there that maybe you've kind of been on the radar, but we haven't heard about a kind of a Western release yet. That's, I think, what's being worked on, and that's what's being discussed on behind closed doors. And so yeah, that's going to be interesting to see here in a couple of months or a year, whether I end up being right on the Blue Protocol prediction, especially with them, because it's like if this deal is working out for them in such a very positive way, I think that gives them a lot of leverage to be able to sit here and say, hey, you know what, we can keep working on these deals. But we'll ultimately have to wait and see, guys. That's going to be it for this video. Lost Ark is surging #1 MMORPG in the West at this time. Curious as to your thoughts. Sound off below. Look forward to them. Thank you guys so much for watching, for listening, for being here. Hopefully I'll see you in my next video, but until then, take care.
Yeah. It's time to chill out on the couch and read some comments. That's right. You know me when it comes to Destiny. I'm off with a clan, and I'm glad you're feeling better. Oh yeah.